Hey everybody. So I just made this really awesome 15-minute video with my phone that I can actually edit and make look really nice. And I made some purple Play-Doh. Apparently my phone ran out of storage in the middle of recording it, so it didn't get that video. So we're gonna do this again. I need to grab a new color because we're not gonna make purple Play-Doh again. Let's hope my Chromebook Screencastify can work better than my phone. Okay, we're gonna do blue Play-Doh this time. And I'm also gonna experiment with adding the food coloring to the water, which last time I kneaded it in, kind of like it was fondant, like for cake. Okay, so we always start with cooking by reading your recipe first. That way you know exactly what to expect. You don't screw up because you've read it before. So ingredients: 1 cup of flour, 1/3 cup of salt, 1/3 cup of water, and food coloring. And basically you just take the flour and the salt, you mix it together, and then you add the water and you mix it together and knead it. We're going to add the food coloring to the water this time, changing it up. We're not following the recipe 100%, but I've already done the recipe. So at this point, experimenting can happen. So let's get started. We're going to add the flour first. I'm going to kind of show you how to do a little bit of measuring while we're at this. I'm not going to simply scoop my cup in and then level my flour off, because it will compact it and it will add 25% more flour than necessary. I'm going to fluff up my flour with this spoon first, get it nice and fluffy and not compacted, and then I'm going to spoon it into my cup. I don't want to pack it. I'm not going to push it in with my spoon because that defeats the purpose. You want it nice and airy. The best way to measure is actually by weight, but here in America, we don't do that. We have our US system. So now I am going to go and fill in any of the little gaps that I have with my knife, just kind of tapping it up and down. And then I'm going to just level her off. Again, I didn't compact it. Now this matters, maybe not for the Play-Doh, because if there's too much flour, I can adjust the ingredients by adding more water. Not a big deal. But when I'm making cinnamon rolls, for example, it takes me hours to get my yeast to activate and make my dough rise. So why do I want to go to all that work and then not measure properly and make my recipe screw up? So when you're baking, baking's a science and it has to be done perfect. We'll practice that every time we cook, especially when we're able to cook at school. Next, we're going to measure our salt. Now at school, we have giant containers that you can simply scoop and level. I don't at home. I have my lovely little mason jar that why am I taking this lid off? That I can use to pour my salt in my cup. This is not quite proper, but you'll see what I do to make it a perfect measurement. See, I overfilled it. I let it spill out onto the paper plate. I'm going to use my knife to level it off. There we go. We have a perfect measurement. And keep in mind, I use the flat side of my knife, not the rounded side. I just scoop myself a little cave if I use the rounded side. So pour it into my flour. Now I can take the lid off. And because I used a brand new clean paper plate, I'm just going to pour the salt back in. There we go. So many of you will be doing this at home if you choose to make a Play-Doh instead of buying it. Fun tips. Okay, so I'm just going to mix this all together real good. If I were baking, I would use a wire whisk and I'd try to get all these lumps and clumps out of the flour. Or I could use a sifter to try to get the lumps and clumps out, but I'm making Play-Doh, so it's not the end of the world if it has its lumps and clumps, because I'm going to need those out. To measure water properly, you need to have a flat, level surface, and you need to be eye level with it. So I'm going to pour from my cup into my liquid measuring cup to 1/3. I went a little bit crazy with this. Pour a little bit out. Well, that's perfect. So if I were standing above it, this measurement would not be accurate because the glass distorts the measurement. So when I stand up, I'm going to look at this and see what it looks like at 1/3, and I'm going to tell you how distorted this is. So looking at it from here, which is not eye level, it looks like it's about that much above the 1/3 line when I know it is actually perfect because I was eye level with it. So you have to be eye level with your liquid measurements. Oh yeah, I told you I was going to add food coloring to this first. Now I did 9 drops in my last Play-Doh round of making Play-Doh. You can see it's got something white behind it. It's like a lavender. So 9 drops didn't really color it super dark. So I'm going to do 15. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. There we go. I am done with this butter knife. So I am going to stir it. I'm going to put it on my paper plate so it doesn't dye the counter. And it might possibly dye the wooden spoon. So if you have parents who don't want you to dye the wooden spoon, you might need to use metal or plastic. So keep in mind, you're not in the mood to dye our kitchen equipment. There we go. Put that on my paper plate too because the drip's coming down the cup. Can drip onto the counter. Personally, I kind of hate my counters. They're fake wood. The people who lived in this house before me, they obviously picked out these counters. We haven't renovated that part of our kitchen yet. So maybe I do want to dye my counters and convince my husband that, oh no, our counters are dyed. We need new ones. Okay, don't do that to your parents. They would absolutely hate this. Oh, I'm just rambling as I'm mixing. So I'm getting to the point where I do need to put this on a flat surface and knead it. At this point, by touching it, I can see that it's dyeing my fingers just the tiniest bit, but I don't care. I'm okay with that. If you have a problem with it, get yourself a pair of plastic gloves, which these are the ones I used for the purple when I actually kneaded the dye directly into the dough instead of putting it in the water. Yes, my hands would be purple right now if I hadn't done that. And yes, we dyed the wooden spoon a little bit, so keep that in mind. I'm going to show you actually how to protect your counters. I am going to get a washcloth and I got it wet. And I'm just going to stick this down on the counter. Now I'm going to put my cutting board on top of it. See? It's not slipping and sliding all over the place. You can see there's purple on this. I use this for my first dough. So now I'm going to pour this out onto my cutting board. Yes, it looks like it's not a dough. It doesn't look like it's going to work out, but that's how many of our doughs start, including when we make our gingerbread houses. They just are dry and crumbly looking. But the kneading is what forces it together. If you don't want to get all kinds of dough into your rings, take them off. You can also take your watch off if it sits too low. But basically, I'm just going to take this, and here I'm going to make it so you can see this better. And I'm going to just start by smashing the dough with my hands, just trying to force it together because right now it's crumbs. So you're just going to keep doing this, folding it over on top of itself and just smashing it with your hands. Now I have to say that this is going a lot better as far as the dye goes than when you put the dye in second. Now, there are some applications where you can't add the dye first. Like, let's say I'm making fondant, which is basically Play-Doh for cake. I make a big batch of it, and I want to make multiple colors. Obviously, then I'm going to want to make white fondant and add the color to it. So, with one portion of Play-Doh, not a big deal. Now, this recipe, I actually cut it by thirds. It was supposed to have 3 cups of flour, a cup of water, and a cup of salt. I cut it down so that it would make a single recipe, not a recipe that would work for like 4 kids. So this doesn't waste many ingredients. In fact, if you don't want to go out and spend money on this project, don't. Just go into your cabinets at home, grab some flour, grab some salt, and make your Play-Doh. The cheapest way, not the easiest way, but hey, this is a cooking class and you're supposed to be getting some measuring experience in, so get that measuring experience in. Now, I do have to say, the salt in this recipe, it may seem like it's excessive, but it's really, 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 really important to this recipe. The reason why there's so much salt in this recipe is because of the fact that this is a dough made with perishable ingredients, and the salt works as a preservative. If I didn't add so much salt to this, a few days from now, this would just be completely molded. So the salt is going to prevent your dough from molding. Now I can see that it's still just a little bit, like it's not perfect right now, but it's not terrible. I want to add a little bit of oil to this to help make it not as cracky looking. So you can grab whatever oil you have at home. If you have spray oil, go for it. Spray her down. If you just have the oil that you can pour out of the bottle, just put it in a small little container, like a small little container, and drizzle it on there, or put it in your hands first and use your hands to work it in. So this oil is just going to help smooth out the dough a little bit. You can see I am getting a little bit blue, but this is actually going to wash out pretty easy. Again, you can wear gloves to prevent yourself from turning colors, or you can simply use no dye at all. You don't have to use dye, or you can wear gloves. There we go. So I can knead this. This is ready. Now for added fun, you can always add a little bit of Kool-Aid, packet of Kool-Aid to it, the powder, to make it smell nice. I've seen Play-Dohs do that before. That's not necessary, and it might make it a little bit dry, so you might end up having to add more water or oil to it. But you can have fun with the Play-Doh. You don't want it too dry, but you don't want it too wet because we want to work with it with our knife skills. All right, that's our Play-Doh. So again, this is great practice for measuring, and you don't have to go out to buy anything, especially those of you who don't feel comfortable going to the stores right now, especially with the coronavirus. So enjoy. Pushing stop. There it is.